Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone who's joining us right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. We've got a couple people joining from all over the world. Super excited today. Just some background information. My name is Paul Tkach. I'm the Director of Business Development and Sales here, joined by Dave Carr here, our VP of Marketing. And today we're going to cover the 5 lead generation strategies for industrial. And I'm super excited today. I think we've got some really exciting insights and strategies to share. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Well, again, we appreciate everybody that's taking time to join. This is a really fun topic for me. And just to give you a little bit of background, before I came into marketing in SaaS, I spent about 12 years in the industrial world. So I was with GE Energy for a period of time. I used to sell electrical switchgear, managed a couple of sales regions in the southeastern US. And then I ran corporate marketing for one of the largest electrical distributors in the United States for a couple of years. And so really have had a lot of experience in the challenges that industrial experiences around things like lead generation, nurturing leads, creating the right marketing strategies to get those leads. So I personally am looking forward to sharing this today because it is something that's very close and personal to me. So what we'll do, I'm going to keep this extremely casual and conversational. I've got some slides I'll go through, but there's a couple different ways you can ask questions, and I encourage that. So if at any point you want to ask a question, you can use the Q&A or the chat. Raise your hand, however you want to do that. Paul is going to monitor all of that as it comes in, and we'll be happy to answer those questions in real time, and would love to keep this kind of engaging in that way. So don't feel shy. We'll run through that as we go. We've got, again, 5 big points. We're going to talk about the 5 tips for lead generation. And so at the end of each of those 5, I'll take a pause just for us to have Q&A. So with that, let me get my screen share going here, and we can hop right into the discussion. All right, Paul, so am I good? You see screen?
Yep, okay. Looks good right now.
Excellent. All right. So first and foremost, I'll tell you a little bit about us before we go any further. So Klyck.io, our company is a sales enablement platform that helps B2B sellers close more deals and build better relationships with their clients. We'll talk a little bit about sales enablement toward the end of this discussion, just because it ties in on how you can handle your leads and make better use of them. But essentially what we do in a nutshell, we take marketing and sales content and we put it into a repository, and we deliver that to your salespeople in a way that allows them to have better conversations. So we turn content into conversations. We also collect a wealth of data about customer engagement and what's going on in the cycle. We report that to you so that you can use it as direction to run your business. And we take your average sales rep and turn them into a sales expert. So that's really all we're going to talk about us. This isn't a sales pitch today. This is more about talking about how we can help you improve your lead generation strategy. But if you're interested in sales enablement, or if you have some questions at the end, we'll be happy to hop into that as well. So first things last, when we start talking about lead generation, the first thing that we really need to do is start by understanding who is our ideal lead. So I see a lot of companies, especially in the industrial B2B space, go wrong with this because they try to get too broad, or they try to say, okay, well, we have so many different types of customers. We're going to be super generic across all those points. It's very easy to do, especially in big conglomerate companies. But the best thing you can do for lead generation is beginning with as narrowly defined target market as you can. And so there's a term I'm going to use throughout this discussion today called ideal customer profile. If you're not familiar with that already, ICP is, you'll hear that abbreviation a lot, especially in the marketing world. ICP, it just relates to what is that ideal customer profile. So one of the best strategies you can do at the onset of beginning some lead generation activities is to really spend some time going through that. And if you're interested in learning more, we actually have some resources available on ICP and really how you can improve sales and marketing alignment on that. So we'll include some of those in our show notes and also in the email that you'll get at the end of this webinar so that you can dive deeper into that if you want. But for all intents and purposes here, we're just going to talk about ICP and all agree and say that is the place you really need to start. So when you're defining that ICP as narrowly as you can, you really want to start thinking about how you craft your messaging around that specific segment to begin using in lead generation activities. And so when I say lead generation activities, I'm talking about paid advertisement. We'll talk a lot about that in this section, around how to use platforms like LinkedIn and Google AdWords, but then also through organic as well. And so what I mean by organic is the type of content you may have on your website, ebooks, blogs, articles that may attract interested parties to come in and consume that content and then become a lead. So all your messaging and crafting begins around that ideal customer profile so that you're speaking their language and you're talking about challenges that they are facing at different levels of the buying cycle. And another common mistake I see is creating content and trying to use it everywhere. And there's a lot of different strategies you can use based on where that customer is in their cycle, whether they're just in the awareness stage, the consideration stage, or when they're getting ready to make a decision. We'll also talk more about that as we get further into this presentation, but having that content crafted around each of those stages of the cycle is incredibly important. And so understanding not only what those stages look like and how you need to speak to your clients, but also understanding what channels really work well. So we'll talk about where social fits in. We'll talk about where paid ads fits in. We'll talk about where organic content on your website fits in. All those things you need to keep in consideration. So there's a reason that's at the top of the page. So beginning with ICP in mind, building things around that. And then once that's done, you really need to start thinking about the basic framework of how you want to build a lead scoring system and what factors are going to relate to that. What system are you going to use to manage those leads? Maybe that's a CRM system. And one thing I want to reiterate, CRM is really the most important thing you can be focusing on throughout this entire process. So if you don't have a CRM system already, that's certainly something I would encourage you to do. You don't have to have one. You can do this with spreadsheets. It just becomes really painful. But the modern approach, you really need something like a CRM in place to manage it. And ideally, even something like a marketing automation system to help process those leads. We at Klyck use HubSpot, and we're extremely happy with that platform. It's a really good combined CRM and marketing automation platform. Also allows you to manage your ads. So it gives you a great ability to manage that whole inbound lead process. So again, thinking about what factors you want to use to rate and rank those leads, and how you want to score them to make sure that the marketing team knows the right time to turn those leads over to sales. So that could be multiple engagements on your website that you see from those leads. That can be multiple conversions. That can be them clicking through an email cadence. A lot of different things that you can use to create a scoring system. There's not a one size fits all. Every business is going to be different, and every business needs to understand sort of how that flow works to build it around your own model. So I wish I could give you a cookie cutter, but there really isn't one. The most important thing is thinking about how that fits in your business. Also, once you build that scoring system and that process with your technology and then handing off to sales team, you really also need to think about how your whole sales process works from the first touch point that you have with that client once it's handed over through to proposal and through to close, because nurturing those leads is also going to be extremely important. So having marketing processes and sales processes wrapped around continuing to talk to those leads once they come in is extremely critical to doing something with them. Otherwise, you're going to have a ton of leads that sit at the top of the funnel, and you're going to wonder, hey, why aren't things moving? Why am I not getting engagement and ultimately close deals? So all of that has to be structured into a funnel. And I'll let Paul talk a little bit more about that in a moment, because he's done a great job at our company of sort of building that process and what happens once leads get handed over to sales. But the important thing is just beginning with the end in mind. So how does that whole process look once a prospect comes in all the way to the end of the funnel? And then again, who's responsible for delivering on that sales process? So there has to be expectations set in place between sales and marketing around handoff times. So we have SLAs or service level agreements in our business that state, once a lead comes in, we want to have our first touch point with them within 5 minutes. So we do that through HubSpot. We automate an initial email as soon as that lead comes in to give them that first touch point, because time is absolutely critical. We've collected a lot of data on this. There's a lot of other companies that have collected data on this. But basically, the first 15 minutes after someone converts on an online form or a download or however they come in your funnel, that is a critical time to get in touch with them. If you can initiate that within that first 15 minutes, you have an infinitely higher chance of that lead actually engaging with you and moving through the funnel. So again, who's responsible for the sales process? What are the agreed upon metrics in terms of timeline to touch base with that person? How long do you wait to follow up? All those things are pretty important, and you should think about as you begin. So Paul, I know I talked a good bit about how that relates to sales. Anything you wanted to kind of add from your own thoughts on how to manage that?
Yeah, ICP is extremely important. We talk about this all the time. It really sets up a target for you and your team to know who you're going after, especially when you're working with a sales team, right? And you have multiple people who are going out on their own and trying to target people. You have to ensure that they are hitting up the right people and they are targeting the right person. And so the ICP has been a saver for us as well. And we always go back to that. And it's something that you'll go back to every couple of months as well and tweak a little bit, right? Once you learn some more information about your target or your ICP, it's something that you change, right? Something that you'll go back to and tweak and add more information to. So by all means, it's not something that you'll set up at the beginning of your process and it's going to stay entirely the same. You're going to change it. You're going to tweak it depending off of what information you learn. So I think that the ICP is extremely important for teams, for all teams. Doesn't matter what part of the state of process you're in. And then when it comes to the process, I think you're entirely right. Timing is absolutely critical to ensuring that leads respond. We've noticed that within obviously what you said, within the first 15 minutes is a turning point. It's top of mind, right? You have to think about that. These people obviously have an intent when they come in here. They're engaging with content. They're engaging with a demo request. Whatever it might be, they have it top of the mind. And so that's why it's extremely important for you to follow up within those first 15 minutes and take action on that request and the intent they put forward.
Yeah. And good connectivity between sales and marketing is key too. And we have put out so much content around the importance of sales and marketing alignment. And again, we can include some of those in the show notes as well if you want to dive further into that. But having good communication between those two teams is critical, because again, I've seen this so much, and I saw this at GE for years. We would collect leads that came in through our website, and they would sort of float in space, like they would sort of get handed off to a salesperson, but there was never really a process or no one followed up on it. So, to be able to make it work, all those things kind of have to be in place. So, did we get any questions in yet, Paul, from that section before we move on?
Not right now. We're good to go.
Okay. Sounds good. So now that we've talked a little bit about how to, think about your ideal customer profile, begin to think about a lead scoring system, you're probably asking, well, how do you get those leads? What is going to attract those people to come in? And my answer to that always, both as a marketer and also as a former salesperson who's seen this work, the answer is content. The creating good quality content is the absolute most important thing you can do, especially for the marketing side of the business. I mean, sales is certainly going to use it, but creating assets or events or any type of content that's going to engage a potential prospect is going to be the avenue of getting those people into your funnel. So why is content so important now? These are some metrics that we've collected. Some of these came from Aberdeen and also from Gartner and other research companies. But when you look at the buying cycle now, there is a massive amount of content that's being consumed by buyers ahead of a purchase. So one thing we've noticed now is that most buyers are looking at a minimum, and I mean an absolute minimum of 5 high value pieces of content before they decided to make a purchase. What do we mean by high value pieces of content? Ebooks that help educate them, webinars that help educate them, checklists that help them define some way to handle a process inside their business or to tackle a challenge. All of those are great platforms of platforms or genres of content that you can create that will help attract those buyers. So again, that's a huge data point. We also are seeing that as much as 70, possibly even now 75 to 80% of the buying process is completed by the customer before that individual ever reaches out to a salesperson at whatever company they choose to buy from. And the reason I say that's now closer to even to 80% is that post-COVID, with so many things becoming remote and sales meetings becoming less and person meetings becoming less, that self-service is now front and center. And when you look at the next data point, which is the fact that 73% of B2B buying committees are now comprised of millennial generation buyers, that answers a lot of the story of why that's happening. So as we all know, millennials think differently, they buy differently, they have a different process. Doing their own research on Google or through YouTube or through social media is 100% native to that generation. So they don't want cold calls with, guys with and girls with donuts and all those things. Those things are not as effective on the younger generation. The younger generation wants information. They want content. They want to receive something that's going to add value to their decision-making process. And that is what connects them to a brand or a company or a product or a service. So again, content is the key into that. The other breakdown, and we see this all the time when we consult with our sales enablement clients, is that even if you're creating good content that works at the top of the funnel, so marketing is using it, it's getting leads in and you're building your funnel, there's a huge breakdown of that content once it gets down to the salesperson. So up to 75% of content that marketing is creating goes completely unused by salespeople, simply because, number one, they may not have a great way to access it. They may not understand how to apply it. They're not thinking with content about how to use that content to lead someone through a buying journey. It's more of a traditional kind of presentation or, hey, let me hand you a brochure. So content is not just for lead gen, although that's certainly the number one thing you can use it for. But that content can survive and live and thrive all the way through your sales process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the end and we start talking about systems. But for now, that's something that is really worth noting, is that that content has a big gap. So let's talk about how marketing can play into that. So when you think about creating good content, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you really need to do your homework around aligning that content to different stages of the buying cycle. So for instance, if you're going to create educational content, that's really good at the top of funnel or when a customer is in the awareness stage of that cycle, simply because it helps build interest, not only in your service or your platform or your product, but in your brand, in your ability to provide some value to solving a solution. You can't jump necessarily back and forth between all of these. So for instance, if you were creating more proof of value content like customer testimonials or case studies, all those can be extremely powerful to use in the decision-making stage of the funnel. That's not really going to work very well if someone's just interested in learning more, right? They don't want to hear your sales pitch or hear about your customer success. They are just trying to understand, hey, for instance, how could IoT help improve my industrial automation process, right? So maybe they need to learn more about edge devices and cloud networks and data collection. If they don't understand that, you cannot apply something that's a late stage piece of content to that early stage awareness. So that's extremely important. And the three things I always talk about is educational is extremely good in that awareness stage. Engaging content is really good when you get to middle of funnel. So like the area where someone's really going to start thinking about and considering making a move to make a purchase. And what I mean by engaging content is something that brings immediate tangible value or some sort of tactical action for that person. So for instance, that could be a checklist, like a how to get started checklist on how to set your industrial facility up to make better use of IoT devices, automation control, fill in the blank, whatever it is. That's a great thing. webinars like the one we're doing today. That's a great piece of engaging content because it allows someone to learn more, learn deeper, engage with your brand or your company, ask questions. So that works really, really well in middle of funnel. And then finally, the proof of value, which, as I mentioned earlier, things like case studies, customer testimonials, proof of work, that works really well at the end of the funnel. Because at that point, your buyers basically said, okay, hey, look, I've educated myself. I've considered a lot of different options. Now tell me why I should buy from you. So those case studies and things like that really put the teeth in, okay, well, here's what makes us better. And that's where you tell your value prop, right? If you start trying to tell your value prop at the beginning stage in educational, nobody's going to listen. They don't want a sales pitch, right? So you have to build that trust down through the funnel and apply it at the end. So in terms of types of content as well, we talked about ebooks earlier. Those are fantastic. We have great success with ebooks on our side, using those to create inbound interest and conversions into our funnel. Even blog articles are great. Video content is king though. And so what we found is that you get a lot more engagement with video advertisement and an educational video on social media. It could also be repackaging other media into video. So for instance, we record all of our webinars and we repost that video content on our website and through our social media to begin, again, getting more engagement and consideration and people into the funnel. Another thing I talk about all the time, and I think these are still totally underutilized, even as much as the hype is around them today, podcast. And that is still extremely low-hanging fruit. You can literally get started with a podcast by buying a $40 microphone off of Amazon, plugging it up to your computer and downloading a free recording software, which there's a lot out there you can do that with. If you're a Mac user, GarageBand comes right on your Mac free when you open the computer. All of those you can create a podcast with. And we have our own, it's called B2B Enablement. We have had thousands of listens to that podcast this year alone. And it's been a really good way not only to build awareness of who we are and our brand, but it gives you something you can continue giving touch points to your customers with. So if there's topics you're talking about, again, that you know are hot points for that ideal customer profile market, when someone's in your sales funnel, you can send them that content. And Paul does this all the time. And Paul, I don't know if you want to talk about how maybe you shared podcasts before around sales process, but I know that's been important for you and your team, right?
Yeah, podcasts and webinars are great touch points for us on a sales team. I mean, one, it's educational content and we use it with good intent, right? I mean, the reason why we have these webinars and these podcasts are to educate our audience on the various topics that we put out. And so when I am engaging with prospects or customers for that matter, those webinars and those podcasts are really, really good reinforcement points when I'm having a conversation, right? Something that I think is applicable to the people I'm working with that I can share and it's easily digestible. So whether it's a webinar that's upcoming or a podcast that's upcoming, I will look at the list of people I'm communicating with, whether they're prospects or customers, and I'll remind them of that upcoming webinar. And something as simple as just sending over a high value, no ask webinar or podcast or piece of content, you'd be amazed at how many people respond just based off of that value add. So I have gotten an amazing amount of responses just off of saying, hey, John, or hey, Peter, or hey, Larissa, check out this new podcast or this new webinar that we have coming out. It really does add value to that conversation. It does drive it forward in the right direction. So that's how we've used it. And we've seen a lot of success with it, right? And it's with good intent. It's not like we're just throwing it over the fence. It's typically something that we know is going to add value to our clients or our prospects. But that's typically how we've been using it. And it's been really good so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that way it's not a sales pitch or you're asking somebody to get on a sales call. You're actually giving them something that can help them do their job or help educate them. So I'm a big fan of multi-purposing content. So again, you can use that to get interest at top of funnel, but you can certainly use it during your sales process to build momentum. So those are all great ways. Events, as we all know, events are becoming more challenging post-COVID. You're seeing attendance rates dive dramatically. A lot of industrial companies too, and all of you know this, they're on this webinar. Events have been the backbone of so many industries. You know, getting together for those big annual events or those conferences is where you can generate leads or meet your clients or just have that sort of time to connect with the market. Well, in the absence of that, one great way to fill the gap is to have virtual events. So again, webinars are a really easy way to start. You can do that with Zoom. That's actually how we host this webinar. It's I think $40 a month you pay for a Zoom webinar license. You can do that as a way to engage. There's also other platforms that can do more large scale virtual events if you're interested in that. But having those events is also another way to generate leads, because if you're talking about a topic that's really applicable to your ideal customer profile in that market, put that out with paid advertisements, share it on your social media, send it out through your email list, have your sales team distribute it. That's a great way to boost incoming leads into your funnel, simply because when those individuals register, well, guess what? Now you have their email address. Now you know who they are. You can begin a conversation with those individuals. So great, easy way to build leads. Paid ad strategies, and this could be a whole nother chat for another day, so I'll try to keep this simple. But the number one thing I try to recommend to companies when you're thinking about ad strategies for lead generation, don't mix up buying intent with interest and awareness. And I see people get this wrong a lot. So for instance, they may have some really, really specific call to action, like ready to buy kind of content or promotion, and then they try to run it on Facebook. But it doesn't work that way. People are not scrolling through their Facebook feed thinking, man, I want to buy automation control products today, or I want to buy an IoT system for my industrial facility. They're on Facebook because they're bored, they're killing time, and they're looking to see their friends' updates. Facebook is a much better place, or LinkedIn for that matter, is a much better place to just gain interest, to again share some sort of content that may grab someone's interest. So if they're flipping through their feed on LinkedIn or flipping through their feed on Facebook and they see, hey, 5 ways to improve the performance of your industrial control in your facility, they may stop and look at that, right? They may be, hey, that's interesting to me. I want to take a look at that, and they'll click through it. They may download your ebook, or they may convert on that ad to give you their contact information, and then they're in your lead funnel, right? So don't mix that up. Google is a great place to do high intent. So if someone's actively thinking about, hey, I need to go buy more drives and controls for my facility, they may go to Google and physically type in, best drives and control systems, or best edge network systems for industrial automation control, whatever the term might be. Doing the research to understand those terms can also help you optimize your Google strategy. But that's the place you want to start sending people immediately to, like a request a quote form or get in touch with sales, because they're already showing that intent. They're already ready to buy. That's a good time to use that ad strategy. If you're going to go to LinkedIn, which by the way is a fantastic platform, we generate probably 80% or more of our leads from LinkedIn. You got to do it through awareness. You can get a little more creative, that once you've gotten someone in your funnel through awareness, you can retarget them with more high intent type advertisements. But that's a more advanced strategy, and it really requires some automation and complexity. But for all basic intents and purposes, use awareness content in social channels, use call to action and ad strategies that are going to direct people to your site or to your sales team for higher intent channels like Google. So, and again, managing those demand generation activities, one of the things that you want to think about is looking at your channels and understanding where you're getting your best leads. As you just heard me mention, LinkedIn is a hotspot for us. We get great leads there, so we focus a very large percentage of our budget there. But you may find that that YouTube is better. You may find that Google ads are better. So looking at your channels and understanding, where am I getting the most leads, but then also where am I getting the quality? So balancing CPL, which stands for cost per lead, versus quality is also important. So you may go to Facebook or LinkedIn and get really cheap leads. More likely on Facebook. LinkedIn tends to be a little more expensive. But let's say, for instance, you run a strategy on Facebook. You may get 100 leads at 98 cents a lead, but they may be garbage. They may be totally unactionable. So why keep doing that, right? You may be hitting big numbers on your metrics for quantity of leads, but the quality may not be there. So it's always a balance of those two. And then you'll also want to follow all those leads through and calculate what your total customer acquisition cost is. So basically looking at, okay, how much money did I spend in ads this month relative to how many deals did that help me close? And I probably should step back, and a month is probably not the period you want to look at that, because most industrial companies, big B2B companies, have very long sales cycles. So you may want to look at that quarterly, or even every 6 months or yearly, whatever your sales cycle looks like. I would say look at it on those scopes. So if you have a 12-month sales cycle, you probably want to look at your customer acquisition costs relative to all your ad investments over that period of time versus how many you actually converted at the end of that period. That's going to give you an accurate metric. If you try to do it week to week, it's going to look terrible. And this is where I see a lot of companies go wrong with lead generation strategies. They go throw, $1,000 at LinkedIn ads. They get some leads. Nothing happens with them in 30 days. And they say, oh, this sucks. We're just going to totally cut this off. That was a waste of time and money. So you give up too soon. You don't have a strategy. You don't have the whole plan mapped out. So you have to consider those things when you're thinking about those strategies. And then finally, and we'll talk more about this at the end, but having the right MarTech stack. So having the right marketing automation platforms, sales enablement, CRM, all those systems are going to help you nurture those leads in an automated fashion. So it's very important that you have your systems in place to handle that as well. So any questions on that? That's probably the longest section we're going to go through today, just simply because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, Dave, we do have a question actually around how do you find teams organizing or managing that content for use? So I guess to answer that, how do we see teams set up their content for success and know when to use it properly? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would break that into two different sections. So number one, how would you manage it on the marketing side? Having a good repository and a system in place, for instance, and it could even be like, OneDrive, or SharePoint, if you're using Microsoft based systems, or if you're using something like HubSpot, like we use, there's places that you can store that content there. Having a content calendar is really important. So understanding, hey, what are our big what are our big strategies for this month or this quarter? Let's go create content to fuel those strategies, and then put that in a repository where we're using it on a schedule. So, hey, we're posting this on LinkedIn today. We're using this to launch a Google ad campaign today. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And again, it's totally fits your business and kind of how your team is structured. But I would say at the most simple level, you can use cloud-based folder systems to manage it, or your marketing automation. So HubSpot, or if you use Pardot or something like that. From a sales perspective, I would say that the number one way to use it is with a sales enablement system, so that you have that loaded into a system that your salespeople can very quickly say, okay, hey, I need to go have a meeting with someone, and maybe they're in the food and beverage industry. So I want to pull up right now very quickly all of my resources, my content around our solutions for that particular market, and then share that as a presentation when I meet with someone, or share that following up a presentation or a meeting to give them more insight into our solutions. Sales enablement can automate that and save your salespeople a ton of time, up to, I think, 70% is the most recent metric that we've pulled around how much time savings they can have. So marketing, that's sort of, your solution on having an automation system or some folder based, but for sales, it is 100% sales enablement.
Yeah, we quite literally see teams set up content with some of these filters and tags. So filters and tags are obviously another great way of you organizing your content. We quite literally see teams set up content into awareness, consideration, and decision. So when their teams are going into that conversation, they simply check off a filter, or they check off a tag that says, I need content for awareness in food and beverage, and it pops up. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question. That's it's one that we get a lot. All right. Any others, Paul?
Oh, we're good to go forward.
Okay. Sounds good. So number 3 on our list. So one of the best ways you can get new leads is just the good old fashioned leveraging your existing clients. And the concept of that is old, yet it's also becoming somewhat new when you start to think about how a lot of marketers are now viewing the old funnel as the new flywheel. And if you're not familiar with the flywheel, that is just a model that has really come about in the past 3 to 4 years, primarily pushed by companies like HubSpot, who are really promoting this sort of total life cycle around growing your brand. But what the flywheel is basically taking your traditional funnel, awareness, engagement, conversion, but then spinning it right back around to the top of the funnel by using delighted customers to become promoters of your brand. So allowing them to go, to other people they know in their network, and go, hey, like, did you know about company A, B, and C? Did you hear about what they did for our facility? How much energy savings we were able to accomplish by integrating their systems, or how we're able to better manage our processes. So leveraging those customers to create this sort of self-fulfilling cycle of taking total strangers, converting them to prospects, so attracting them in, engaging them through that traditional funnel. So, awareness, consideration, decision, and then delighting them as customers by providing so much value that you use that to continue spinning this flywheel. So there's 3 factors on the flywheel that help it perform and grow. Number 1, that's how fast can you spin that flywheel? So what's your sales cycle? How long does it take to get someone into your funnel all the way through to when they convert and they become a client? So the faster you can spin that flywheel, the more revenue you're going to make, right? The bigger it is, that's also related to revenue. So let's just say, for instance, even if it's not spinning very fast, if you have a lot of pipeline in that flywheel, that's also going to help convert to more revenue. Just simply the volume that you have, or the mass. If you think about it, an actual flywheel, the mass that flywheel has and the momentum it carries, being bigger helps improve the revenue function. And then finally, how much friction is in that flywheel. So again, how it spins, if you're adding friction, that slows things down, correct? So a lot of challenges we see, and we've actually even addressed some of these in our company, is, you may do a great job of bringing in a lot of prospects. You might even be nurturing them really well to where you get them to consideration phase, but then you just have a really hard time converting them at the end of the funnel. So that would be an example of friction. So if you're making good on all those other metrics, but you're really having a challenge converting those customers over into a paid client, that would immediately identify to you that that's an area of focus. So the faster you can spin a flywheel, the bigger you can make it. So the more people you can put into it, and the more friction that you can eliminate. All 3 of those factors are going to spell growth. If you're interested in learning a little more about that, we can include in the show notes a link over to some HubSpot resources that talk about the flywheel. I love the concept, and I think for any marketer especially, it's something really to take into consideration. So let's go on to the next slide here. So how do you fuel your flywheel? One thing I always talk about is working cross-functionally with sales teams. If you're a marketer, working cross-functional with sales teams to help identify success stories. And then number 1, turn those into customer testimonials, or write a case study about how that particular solution really created a win for a customer. Even if that client isn't just going out and shouting from the rooftops to all their friends, you can still leverage that delighted customer again in that flywheel concept to use that to convert more clients. So that's the easiest way to do it. Work cross-functionally with your sales team to identify success. Once you've created those testimonials, again, make sure that you're using them through your channels back again to, where does it need to fit in awareness, consideration, decision making. Those customer testimonials really fit best at the end. So again, keep that in mind when you're using them. Video testimonials are really, really powerful because it sort of hits on 2 big things, right? Video is king, plus customer testimonials make the flywheel spin. So when you put those 2 together, it can be great. Using social media as well, and we've even seen this with some of our clients. If you're doing a really good job helping people understand how your solution brings value, and you're sharing that information out through your social media, if you're doing it right, your existing customers should be commenting on it, liking it, resharing it, and spreading that out for you. LinkedIn is the best place to do that. Their algorithm is still 100% rooted in organic. And what I mean by that is no other platform out there right now, if I go hit the like button on something, there's a super high probability that most of my network is going to see it because it organically shares that to other users. Facebook does not do that anymore. They make you pay for it. Instagram is not really going to do that anymore. LinkedIn is an untapped gold mine, especially for B2B. So if you're sharing that stuff out there and people begin engaging with it, your likelihood of making that grow is infinitely higher than any other platform. So just a tip I would share for you on that front. And then finally, featuring your customers on some of your webinars or your podcasts. We've done this as well. It gives it a great opportunity for your customer to sort of highlight their success, which is always good for someone that you're trying to prospect or work with long term, right? Because you're putting them up on a pedestal and you're allowing them to tell their story. But again, it also becomes a value testimonial for your business. So if you have a webinar that you can invite a customer to, if you have a podcast that you can get them on, that's another really easy way to get a win-win for both your client and to help boost your business. Can really be a good way to generate some additional leads as well. So any questions on Flywheel or leveraging existing customers before we move on?
We're okay right now.
Okay. Sounds good. So the next big piece of the puzzle is going to be leveraging your data. So as with any process, making sure that you've got the proper systems and measurement in place to make sure you understand what your data is, how your funnel is performing is going to be important. So the first thing I would talk about is always tracking your engagement by your segment and by your channel. So again, back to, is Facebook performing better than LinkedIn, or is Google performing better than our website just for organic traffic? You need to understand from each of those segments how your leads are coming in, what your conversion rates are, and then more importantly, how from each channel, how do they go through the funnel? I'll go right back to that example I did earlier. You may get a lot of leads from someplace like Facebook, but they may get totally stuck in the middle of the funnel just because maybe they're not qualified enough, or the quality is not there. So if you're looking at all those by channel, that begins to give you some insights. Where a lot of people go wrong is they just lump all their leads in together, like regardless of channel, and then they start looking at metrics and everything gets skewed. Because then you may say, hey, we have really poor metrics on paid advertisement. Look how everything's getting stuck in middle of funnel. But that may be because Facebook has such a high volume that it's skewing your averages, right? So, Facebook, yeah, you may be getting leads that don't move, but on LinkedIn, you may be getting extremely high quality leads. They're just more expensive, and then they, are actually going through the funnel. But if you combine those together, you lose that visibility. So I always recommend tracking your metrics and your engagement by the channel to understand how it's truly performing, not just the blended average. So again, when you think about those metrics, you want to make sure that you're aligning those KPIs between sales and marketing. So again, like defining what is our acceptable percentage for awareness metrics and engagement and conversion. So for us at our business, we have some KPIs in place where we say, we want to have at least 75% of our marketing qualified leads, of our leads that come in convert to marketing qualified leads. And then all of those marketing qualified leads, we want to have at least 25% of those become a sales qualified lead, where sales team is actually engaging with them. And then even a smaller percentage then would go to qualified opportunity, where we actually have proposal. So those are just examples. You can't just copy paste those. You have to think about where your business fits and what those percentages look like. Even as an industry average, that's also a good place to look. But the most important thing is just having a metric. So understanding, what do we expect? If we get below this metric, that is a red flag for us that something's going wrong. So if for instance, you're getting 1,000 leads a month, but only 20 of them convert to marketing qualified, well, there you go. There's a big indicator that there's probably something wrong at that stage of the process. So make sure you got those KPIs in place. System usage can be another one as well. So, if you're generating a lot of leads, but you don't have a process in your CRM or your sales enablement system or marketing automation, whatever it is, to bring them in and nurture them, that's another breaking point. We use a system called SalesLoft that helps us manage that, the sales process once those leads come in. And we use that sort of in combination with HubSpot. So HubSpot nurtures those leads in an automated fashion until they take real engaging action, and then they get handed over to sales, and then we use SalesLoft to manage that process. So that's extremely important. And Paul, I don't know if you might want to share some thoughts around kind of how system usage helps you and your team, or some best practices there?
Yeah, I mean, on the sales side, the software is so important, right? When we talk about organizing leads, you're dealing with so many leads on a daily basis and so many different types of activities that if we didn't have HubSpot or we didn't have SalesLoft, it would definitely be a mess. It would be a disaster. And so I'm so grateful that we have something that's able to track the activity of a lead when it comes in. So, and then hands it over to me on the sales side. I can see all of the previous activity that's happened, what ads they might have interacted with, what they might have requested if it was a demo. So I'm able to see that historical data. And then from there, I can pop it right into a cadence or a sequence in SalesLoft, which allows me to keep nurturing that lead until they convert properly. And so that organization is critical. And teams who are not leveraging these types of sales tools and stacks are really missing out. And so it goes a really, really long way of having that data organized.
Yeah, totally agree. And the final point I would make here as well is just make sure that your marketing team and your marketing activities are tied to the revenue goal. So, one really easy trap to fall into is, marketing gets measured only on just lead generation, top of funnel. So, hey, oh, wow, we got 7,000 leads this month. That's great. Let's all give ourselves a high five and a pat on the back. But if none of those are moving in through conversion, or at least through the funnel, right? I mean, it's, if you've got a really long sales cycle, the other bad thing you can do is say, okay, well, hey, marketing, you created all these leads, but none of them converted this quarter. Well, if your average sales cycle is 12 to 18 months, you didn't give yourself time, right? So there's a balance in between. You don't want to just measure marketing only on lead generation alone, because then there's no accountability to close. But likewise, if you're trying to put too heavy of an expectation too soon, you can be setting yourself up to fail as well. Not only just because of your sales cycle, but how long it's going to take you to learn the process. So for instance, I say this from experience, most marketing teams in industrial and B2B, that's just not their forte. They're more product marketers. They're more used to creating brochures, or even, God forbid, I say, like flyers, which if you're still making flyers, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of where you need to evolve your strategy. But to be honest, that's where a lot of more traditional marketing teams are. So make sure you're also giving them time to learn, giving them time to educate themselves, adapt. And maybe it's the right move to go hire an agency to help you figure that out. And then you can bring it back in-house once you've got some expertise that have helped your organization figure out how that works inside the company. But giving up too soon based on either unrealistic expectations or just not having a team that has the skill set and placing too high expectations that they're just going to go figure it out are really easy ways to fall short. So just some insight from my own personal experience there. And again, if you're interested in how those funnel metrics work, if that's something you haven't had before, I'm going to send out this presentation so everybody will have a copy of it at the end. You can look at this in more depth. But again, this is just defining, traditional awareness, engagement, conversion, outcome type of metrics. And you can see each here what you can measure at those stages. So if you're looking at awareness metrics, if you need some to look at, maybe you want to look at the percentage of ABM accounts or account-based marketing accounts that come to your sites, or even something as simple as how many extra website sessions am I getting this month based on my lead generation or ad activities. Then that can go even further down. So from engagement, it can be, well, how long did they stay on the website? Did they convert on a forum? How many percent of those people actually engaged? And then further down of that engagement, how many became marketing qualified? How many became sales qualified? So all of that can give you line of sight to what to measure and at what stage to measure it, so that you can better understand that flow. So if you don't have these metrics set up, it's probably not going to work really well. So make sure you've got this in place. All right. So this is our last section here, but any questions on that, Paul, before we keep moving on?
No questions right now.
Okay, great. So the last big piece of this is just the technology behind what you're doing with your lead generation activities. Investing in your MarTech stack. And if you're not familiar with the term MarTech, that's just marketing technology. And that can mean a lot of different things. Even things like, CRM technically can kind of bleed over into that. But that's your marketing automation system, any sort of lead generation systems you're using, if you've got chat bots on your website, all that stuff sort of falls into MarTech. But I would say that there are three really big ones for B2B and industrial, and those are your CRM system, your marketing automation system that's going to help you manage that process, and your sales enablement system that's ultimately going to empower your salespeople to do a better job of closing. We recently did some benchmarking surveys with executives in our space, and we found some really interesting insights. I'm going to share those with you today. But through that survey, we found that 18% of our respondents still don't have a CRM. So that's still concerning, right? Like if you don't have a CRM system, it's going to be really, really hard to do any sort of modern marketing or lead generation activities. So if you don't have one, immediately think about how you fix that. Even if you do have one, we found that only 35% of those respondents had what we would consider a good utilization of CRM, which would be over 60% of their people using it on a regular basis. So that's pretty rough, right? You know, if you've got 65% of people in the B2B space that just don't have a good utilization of their CRM, again, that's going to be hard for you to manage that process. We found that 71% of our respondents said that they don't track individual customer touch points in CRM, which can be extremely important. Number one, just so you can help your sales team understand what's been going on in deal flow, and your sales executives can manage them on how they're managing that deal flow. But that also becomes challenging because if you want to run more advanced marketing tactics, you really need to know what's going on at the sales level so that you're not doing something stupid, right? You're not sending out, a marketing drip email cadence that has nothing to do with maybe what products or solutions that customer has been talking about with their sales rep. So tracking touch points is important. Another big one that really stood out, of all those respondents that we had in B2B, only 12% of them had a sales enablement platform. Sales enablement platforms can do really big things in terms of boosting your conversion performance. So it's really not related to lead generation, but it's more related to lead action. So how are you converting those? We found with sales enablement systems, clients can reduce their sales prep time and their sales administration time by up to 70%, and closed deals can be boosted by up to 20% if you're using a sales enablement system to help guide that conversation once sales is engaged. And again, a big piece of that is content, because sales enablement helps apply content when and where you need it to make those deals work faster. So big gap in sales enablement. 35% of those respondents said they still don't have a marketing automation system. I would say probably 5 or 6 years ago, that number may have even been 50%. I do see trends in the B2B space and even in industrial that more companies are moving to add marketing automation systems. And it's really imperative. So, I mean, to me, it's CRM number one, marketing automation number two, sales enablement sort of number three, but a marketing automation system is really important. So if you don't have one in place, I said this at the start, I'm a big fan of HubSpot just because it's so simple. The cost is way lower than something like Marketo or Pardot. It's not so big and intimidating. Small teams can use it, but I've also seen multi-billion with a B dollar companies use it very effectively as well. So it's a really good system that can work with a big, broad piece of the market. Another data point we found was that 87% of our respondents said that they don't use any of their CRM data to help empower their marketing campaigns. That's just low-hanging fruit. If you're looking at CRM data and understanding where deals are in the flow, or even just segmentation information to know how to run your marketing campaigns, that's just low-hanging fruit, table scraps that you can pick up and make a big impact with right off the bat. And then finally, 70% of respondents said that their sales team really doesn't have easy access to content. And what do I mean by that? Like presentations, brochures, customer testimonials, case studies, all the content that they're going to continue to need to use to finish out that nurturing cycle. So that's a big gap. And again, that's where sales enablement systems can come in and fill that gap to help you ultimately convert those leads that you're paying a lot of money to produce. So I talked a little bit about marketing automation, just to reiterate, quite exponential growth within the industrial and the B2B sector. The ways that can help, most B2B buyers, as I mentioned, are doing a lot of their own research. They're performing 8 to 12 online searches. And I think this is even an older statistic. It says here 57%. We now know that that's closer to 70, that they have gone through their buying process before they engage. Purchases, 67% of purchases for multiple industrial manufacturing industries were influenced by digital. That's a no-brainer, and especially post COVID, that number is even higher. And then 80% of marketing automation users do see a notable increase in numbers of leads, and 77% of them report higher conversion rates, simply because that marketing automation system allows you to nurture and manage that at scale without having to have human touch. So once you program it in the system on all the steps you want to take, you can manage 10,000 leads with the same amount of effort that it may take you to manage 100 leads doing it manually. So really, really huge boost in productivity if you're using marketing automation to manage those leads and grow. And then finally, back to kind of where sales enablement fits in. If you want to empower your sales team with content, sales enablement is the way to do it. We have found through our own data and industry research that approximately like 40% of selling time each week is spent just literally preparing for meetings. So whether it's getting proposals together, getting presentations together, going back and looking at CRM records, it's just a big administrative drain on salespeople to prep. If you really want to see the breakdown, we talked about content. So approximately 3 hours spent each week searching for marketing content, 8 hours spent searching for customer information. That's literally a whole day out of your person's week. And then 4 hours just spent creating presentations. So if you had something in place that automated those presentations or provided them on demand, you can rip out a lot of that. Sales enablement can do it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, reduce your prep time by up to 70%. Paul talked a little bit about filters and tags, how that works in sales enablement and how that can bring that content into view when and where salespeople need it. You can connect it to your CRM. Most good sales enablement platforms do that. We have an integration actually with Salesforce.com where the salesperson never even has to leave Salesforce. It actually pops up inside of Salesforce, recommends next actions, recommends content, gives them the ability to share it. They never even have to leave that Salesforce screen. So there's just a lot of ways you can use it. And then the data and analytics you get from it are just incredibly powerful to help run your business. So you can understand how often your customers are engaging. How many times did they look at that email? How long did they look at that proposal you sent? How many multiple opens over time happened on a case study or a video or whatever. Sales enablement in a lot of ways is just the same as marketing automation for marketers. Sales enablement can be that same sort of system for in salespeople because it allows them to automate what they're doing and collect a ton of data on what's going on. And if you're a sales manager or a sales leader, that is really important because you can go look and have a much better insight into, hey, what are my salespeople actually doing? How many meetings are occurring? How engaged are those customers after the meeting? What types of content has actually worked to move deals through? And then you can use that for all sorts of ways to better manage your sales pipeline and increase your conversion. So MarTech in general is just is a huge piece, but I would again focus on those three core systems: CRM, marketing automation, and sales enablement. So I know we're getting pretty close on time here, Paul. Did we have any questions on that before we kind of get close to wrapping up?
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay, great. So all that comes back to, if you want to create more leads and you want to manage those leads better, sales and marketing alignment is a huge piece of that. Just some final stats to leave you with on why that's important. Firms that have good alignment have 32% higher revenue versus their competitors. They have 38% higher win rates on their sales pipeline when they have teams really integrated well together, 27% faster revenue growth rates, and 36% higher customer retention. So sales and marketing alignment is absolutely imperative, not only to the lead generation standpoint, but the entire nurturing through the process. So the final things in review, number one, define your ideal customer profile and build a lead scoring system. Number two, produce really good, engaging content for each stage of that cycle. So remember, awareness, consideration, decision, content works different in each stage. Number 3, leverage those existing customer relationships, build that flywheel model. And again, if you're not familiar with it, we'll put resources in the email that goes out. Number 4, take action from your data. So make sure you're looking at the data based on what's happening in your sales funnel and use it to better manage the process. And then number 5, make sure you've got the right MarTech stack in place to manage the process so that you can do it effectively, efficiently, and at scale. So with that really brings us to the end of the discussion today. Any final questions from anyone before we get ready to wrap up?
Don't have anything right now, but if we give it a minute here, maybe.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting on any of those last ones coming in, first of all, thank everyone for joining today and for hanging with us through this discussion. I hope this added a lot of value to you. I hope this gave you some things to think about. If you want to know more about this, again, I'm going to send out a link to this webinar on demand. You can go back and rewatch some sections. We'll also include a lot of resources. Check out our podcast as well, B2B Enablement. We have tons of great episodes on there on just a number of topics relating to sales and marketing activities for industrial and for B2B. We release episodes often, so sign up for notifications and get those episodes there. Check out our blog. We've got a ton of great topics there as well on our blog around how to manage lead generation, how to improve sales and marketing alignment, how to manage your tech stack, all of those things. So we would love to help continue providing value to you if you want to check out any of those resources. And reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn myself, so is Paul. I love getting in conversations with people that I've met through our webinars or through our podcasts. And so both of us are really active. So hit us up on a direct message there or follow us on our Klyck page. We're always posting. We post every day, and we always are posting information and insights on how to improve your business and how to bring your sales and marketing alignment to the next level. So any last call for questions? Any last questions before we get ready to sign up?
We're A-okay right now. It looks like. I think we're okay.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, Paul, thank you as well for commentary and for hanging in there with us. And we wish everybody a good day and have a fantastic weekend.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody, and take care.
Thanks. Bye.